You've been working hard, taking on new projects, mentoring others, building new skills. But when you look up, it's not clear what comes next. The old idea of a straight line career doesn't quite fit anymore. And for many workers, that's both exciting and unsettling. Scroll through TikTok or Reddit and you'll see it everywhere. Videos about fake promotions, threads about senior IC purgatory, posts from people who want to grow but aren't sure in which direction. Some crave new titles, others just want new experiences. But in today's world of flatter, more agile organizations, it can be easy to lose your bearings. So today we're asking, what happens when your career has no GPS? And what can organizations do to guide people forward? I'm Eric Glass. This is Piece of Work, a Dayforce podcast. Let's start with a quick rundown of how we got here. Over the past decade, many companies have flattened their hierarchies, cutting layers in the name of speed and collaboration. And it's worked, to a point. Less time spent on approvals, faster decisions, but it also left fewer visible steps for people to climb. In fact, a Deloitte survey found that job postings for middle management plunged 42% between 2022 and 2024. At the same time, employees started rethinking what growth means. They still want to advance, but not always straight up. Some want to try new skills or pivot sideways. The problem is, most companies weren't built for that kind of movement. And the data backs it up. A 2022 Pew study found that one of the top reasons people quit was a lack of growth opportunities. And LinkedIn's 2024 Workplace Learning Report found that 94% of employees say they'd stay at a company longer if it invested in their career. So now both sides are trying to figure it out. Employers want flexibility, employees want direction, and somewhere in between, the meaning of career growth got lost. Now we need to figure out what to do about it. This all got me thinking, if careers today have no GPS, maybe people need more examples of how to thrive without one. Angela Chambers knows that journey firsthand. Before becoming a manager of talent acquisition, she spent years in journalism covering some of the world's biggest stories for a major US network. Then one day, she decided to tell a different story, her own. Now she helps others do the same, guiding people as they rethink what growth means and where their next chapter might begin. Angela joined me to talk about what it's really like to change lanes mid-career and what companies can do to make that process a little less scary and a lot more human. Tell us a bit about your career pivot and what you were doing before and after.
My lifelong dream was to be on air as a news producer, Eric. And so I went into college thinking that's what I was going to do. And so everything I did, every class I took was to achieve that goal. Some way, maybe like halfway through college, I thought I want to be a producer. I don't want to be on air. I'm shy, as you recall. And so I pivoted to the producing side, behind the scenes. And upon graduation, I was lucky enough to get my dream job working for one of our national network news outlets in New York City. I started right away. It was exactly what I wanted to do, exactly where I wanted to be. And I still remember very clearly the excitement and the energy of walking into that newsroom that first day. That you couldn't tell me I was supposed to be anywhere else or doing anything else. And so my very first business trip was out to Los Angeles to cover the O.J. Simpson trial. And my job was to accompany a cameraman every day to get his walking into the courthouse and out of the courthouse. And then later, I was tasked with trying to find jurors to talk to. And that really started this wonderful career of meeting really fascinating people and interviewing them or being in the room with newsmakers and politicians and athletes and celebrities. I was presented with different opportunities to stretch and to sort of reinvigorate that passion. But it started to not feel right. Like around 2010, I was presented with this opportunity to take a buyout with a bunch of people at that network. And I had been there for 16 years. Like, what was I thinking leaving? Where would you go? What are you going to do? And oh, by the way, what if you fail if you leave? My family, my mom was like, you have the job of a lifetime. Like, hush, just put your head down and do work. We didn't come from a family where, I have a sister who's been a teacher for like 50 years, right? So, like, we weren't the kind of family where you just sort of throw caution to the wind. And I'm not that person really. So, but when presented with the opportunity to take the buyout, it felt like a crossroads and I needed to believe in myself. And so I was like, you're going to figure it out. I traveled for a little bit. And when I came back, someone called and said, we're looking for someone on our TA team to help us find editors and writers at AOL.com, their hyperlocal news site, patch.com. And I said, I don't know how to be a recruiter. And she said, you know how to be a good writer, you know what a good editor looks like, and you know how to talk. And so I went. I'd like to say I never looked back, but it was an immediate fit. And I stayed there for 2 years and it was awesome.
Incredible that you stepped out of, that you felt something no longer aligned, you felt something that was enough to tell you you needed change, but without knowing what the next thing would be. Were there some things that you did to just let that be?
I was so afraid, I am pretty naturally risk averse, and, I just knew it didn't feel right anymore, and I talked to friends, and I had one particular friend, someone who's known me my entire life, say to me, what are you gonna do if you wake up 10 years from now and you have the same feeling? What do you have to lose? You have a network of friends, to catch you if this doesn't go the way we think it will, but I believe in you and, you believe in you, and, those kinds of conversations were sort of the fuel that, ignited the confidence that I think I do have as well as being risk averse, and so, admittedly, I didn't go off to France and think, "Aha, I should be a recruiter." Like, that didn't happen, but when she started to talk to me about what it meant to be successful or how you could be successful in this role, I have relationship management skills. I have communication skills. I know how to build a network.
Yeah, but what's so cool too, though, is the way you have still, kind of connected it to this very different world of TA, right? But when does career uncertainty in a candidate cause you to hesitate?
I think uncertainty in and of itself is not necessarily, a red flag, and certainly it does depend on the job, but, you know, I'm still shaping my path. I have some ideas and here's how I think I can add value is much different than I'm not really sure and I'm open to anything, right? Like one says
Mm.
I'm curious. There's just much more intentionality. And so those are the people that I love talking to, right? We can't design your next chapter. But if you've put some thought into where the direction in which you're headed, that's something that I can work with. So it's not necessarily uncertainty. It's like, how you demonstrate where you are in the process of your next step.
And maybe the other side of it too is, maybe, jumpiness based on, wanting to achieve, a certain degree of fast progression, right? Maybe it's a earlier stage or a early career, person that, is trying to move quick into a certain title or whatever, a certain role. How do you coach those kind of candidates? How do those kind of chats go?
I don't want to yuck their yum, like, right? I don't want to dim their fire. The ambition and that eagerness that I had, by the way, when I left for college, and I was like, I'm about to be the president of that network. Um, like, that can actually really inspire someone to do like, to take on their first job, conquer that first job, I should say, really well, like, be really great in that first job. Take all of that ambition and energy and passion and thrive in that first job. I tell my team that all the time. I actually talk a lot about this thing, called From the Backpack to the Briefcase, because it is, it's not easy to, ascend to the top of the mountain in corporate America anymore. So it's not like, in college you take a test and you get elevated to honors, English. You really have to put in the work and um, raise your hand and do those stretch assignments. The path to promotion, it's not a race. It's also not on a, like your calendar. It may be great if you get promoted in 6 months. It may also be, that you're not promoted for a year and a half. It depends on a lot of things that are outside of your control. Good work is recognized and it's not on a timetable. That's what I tell them.
Love that. Love that. So I guess what advice do you give leaders in terms of how they can, look at and consider unconventional talent?
So I do talk to the hiring managers about what they are trying to solve for. I ask them to accept non-traditional ways. As managers, maybe it becomes a little easy for us to just hire people who make our lives easier. Like I don't have to do too much. We just want to like plug and play, right? Like drop them into the role and let them go and not have to worry about it so much. But how exciting is it if you get to bring someone in and help develop them into more of the person that you thought you needed in that role? It's so rewarding to help shape someone's career. Hopefully they'll stay with you for a really long time. But if they don't, for whatever reason, they always associate you with the person that gave them the additional skills that they needed to realize professional growth. That's awesome.
Angela's story shows what can happen when someone takes a chance on themselves and on someone else. But even when change works out, it can still feel uncertain. To explore that side of the story, I spoke with Megan Rafuse, therapist and CEO of Shift Collab. Megan left a career in government to build a small therapy practice. Since then, it's become one of the fastest growing in Canada. She knows the emotional side of career ambiguity and what it takes to turn uncertainty into growth, for herself and for her team. When people talk to you as a therapist about feeling stuck or unsure what's next in their career, what are the common themes that stand out to you?
Honestly, if I had a dime for every what if I have heard in the therapy session, I would like to say I would be wealthy, but honestly, I just would have spent all of those dimes with my own what ifs as a CEO and running a business. And so, when it comes to feeling stuck or unsure or uncertain, what often stands out to me, both as in my work as a therapist and as just like a human who's learning how to run a company, is that those feelings of being stuck or uncertain aren't necessarily tied to the situation itself. They're actually tied to this disconnect between what we know to be true deep down and what we're ready to act on. So, in my work as a therapist, what I typically have seen is often people confuse clarity with certainty. We think that we need a perfect plan. We need to know all of the steps moving forward. We need to be able to look a year in ahead and know exactly what's going to happen. But in reality, life just doesn't work like that. What we really need to do is learn how to embrace discomfort. We're living in a time where the line between discomfort and misalignment can feel almost impossible to read. People are being asked to evolve inside systems that just haven't evolved with us. And when that happens, I tend to try to ask them a question. I say, look, does this challenge you're facing feel like a stretch? Does it feel like you're expanding, that you're trying new skills, that you're growing new muscles? Or does it feel like erosion? Does it feel like you're disappearing? Does it feel like you're losing yourself? Are you starting to find yourself apathetic or exhausted?
When you were sitting in the role you had in government and feeling like there's something more, like how did you go from I'm sitting here and I know there's something more for me to like actually starting to understand what that picture was?
Yeah. Steve Jobs has a quote that says something like, we can connect the dots looking backwards, but we don't see them when we're looking forwards. So it's really easy for me now to say, well, my mom died of cancer when I was 16. At that time, my dad was looking for a therapist for me, and I was grieving and I was angsty. And every therapist just didn't feel right for me. I didn't feel like I could open up and talk. So, throughout my 20s, I felt like I was always running away from this image of being the girl whose mom died. And I think at that time, I started to think, well, why isn't there a therapist that feels relatable to me? Why are all therapists, like, for lack of a better term, old white men? Where are all the young people that I feel like could relate to me or be open about grief? And so I think for me, that was such a catalyst of, like, I saw a problem in the market and I was like, I need to solve this because I want to build what my younger self needed. But at the same time, when I worked for the government, I started to think, I kind of want more. I'm not feeling fulfilled. For me, it was kind of born out of necessity. I was in my government job. I had taken all these courses and just launched a private practice working evenings and weekends. And I realized I loved being a therapist. At the same time, 3 months in, I had a catastrophic concussion. I was in a car accident. I was rear-ended and I was off work for 9 months. And during that time, I realized, you know what? I only get one life. And there's a little privilege here because I did have a pension that I could cash out. And I said, now is my time. It is the time. Behind the scenes, I think for a lot of people who take a leap, there's a catalyst that launches us. Whether for me, it was when I was 16, I had an idea. When I was 29, I thought, let's go full in. And trust that a little bit. Trust that you have the capacity to grow and stretch and build what you need to build a life that feels good, and ask for support along the way.
When you're in kind of like real CEO mode and you're like, hey, we got to grow the business, we got to grow clients, and we got to, run pay, and we got to do all these things, right? Like, do you find you lose a little bit? Like, does the aperture close sometimes? You have to push yourself back into like your wider, balanced, place where you bring your skills of, therapy and psychology and your own experience of how to sort of break through. Do you find like it's hard to navigate through these different roles and experiences?
Yes, it is so hard. And I've been doing this for 9 years. I've been a therapist while growing this business, then went full-time CEO. And what made me a really great therapist is a very different skill set than that of a CEO. I remember early on in my career as a therapist Googling, like, what is payroll, how to do taxes, like there's no illusions here. I have spent a lot of time with my friend Google and trying to figure out the basics of how to run a business. When you become a therapist in school in your master's program, there are no business classes. And so I not only felt like an imposter in the business world, I didn't feel connected to my fellow therapists because I was now a CEO running a business and it felt sort of disconnected. And so for me, the way that I deal with it, honestly, is I have to constantly remind myself it's a practice. I am learning too. It's a constant learning curve. I feel like I am in this like constant stress. Like every day I'm just like working new muscles and I'm like, oh gosh, am I lifting the right amount? Did I do it correctly? And I don't have all the answers. And any CEO who tells you that they do are likely just hiding behind a facade that they have it figured all out. But when I really think about it, if I distill it down, one word is impact. My job is to make sure that we can impact people's lives in a sustainable way. So, in thinking through that, I was like, okay, so I have two groups of clients. I have therapists and we have clients seeking mental health care. I need to make it the best place for therapists to work so that they can offer the best care for clients. And if I feed that loop, we'll be sustainable and okay.
Are there other practices or rituals or processes that you try to drive that helps alignment to the vision, that helps, clarity, not only clarity of the culture, but ultimately, behaviors and actions that are the culture in action every day. Um, what else? Is there any other nuggets in there that are like at the front of your mind in terms of like, we don't always nail it, but I try to do a few of these other things to drive vision and culture.
I'll tackle this two ways. So first, when I think through our the way that we support employees. So we know, and the research through Harvard Business Review supports this, that stretch assignments, job crafting, and cross-functional exposure are driving real development more than promotions. As a small business, we have to be mindful that we don't become so top heavy that it becomes unsustainable. So we really work hard to empower our people to take on opportunities that will stretch them and help them feel, we want them to feel good about their work. We want them to learn new challenges and to grow. And so we know the research supports that, so we do that. We also care about supporting people and expanding their impact. And honestly, internally, as we've scaled, we've really had to think about how culture is not something that you can just set and forget. We are a business of impact, and we are in a highly regulated industry. And so while we're supporting people through some of their hardest moments, it means our team is along with those people and they are carrying that weight. So people who are drawn to do this work are drawn because they care deeply. And that means that we have to ensure we offer the deep support. We offer, conversations around boundaries and how they can protect themselves and compensation.
It was really great to speak with Megan and Angela. Both have lived the uncertainty that so many employees and leaders are feeling today. Angela walked away from a successful journalism career to start over in talent acquisition. Megan left a secure government job to build one of Canada's fastest growing therapy practices. Very different journeys, but the same truth. Clarity doesn't always come before the leap. Sometimes it's the leap that brings the clarity. Here's what I took away from our conversations. First, growth starts with courage, and organizations can make space for it. People don't always need a new title to grow. They need permission to use their strengths in new ways. For HR leaders, that means designing career paths that move across, not just up, and recognizing potential over pedigree. Second, not all discomfort is bad, and leaders need to know the difference. Stretching can feel hard, but it fuels engagement. Erosion is when people truly start to fade. The best leaders help teams tell the difference and give them the support to move through it. Third, career growth is never a solo act. It happens when people have mentors, advocates, and honest conversations, not just annual reviews. That's how you turn uncertainty into direction. Both conversations reminded me that changing direction isn't a failure. In fact, it's often the detours that help us do the work we're meant to do. And our job as leaders is to make sure no one needs to travel that road alone. Thank you for listening to Piece of Work. I'm Eric Glass. If you've enjoyed the show, let us know on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts.